Thank you for that lovely introduction. My name is Karen Wilson. This is Roosevelt Hatter Purifoy. And yes, I'm those who don't know. This is a very big thing. And I want to say it is such an honor to be here on so many levels. One of them being, I'm a little girl from New York City, you know? And every time I come to Chicago and open my mouth, I'm like, are you crazy? But I want to say my thank yous. You know, of course, it's always close enough to Sunday to say thank you to God. I want to say thank you to Dr. Janice Monti, because somehow, when I came to Blues in the Spirit 1, I got a call about Blues in the Spirit 2. I was like, excuse me, what? And then she said Chuck D was doing the other thingy, and my daughter said, excuse me, what? And so I really need to thank her. And the blues community in this house, Cece, who introduced me so beautifully last night. And Sharon Lewis, I don't know if she's here yet. Is she here? Child came in on a plane last night and said, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow morning. I want to thank, these are not the reading glasses. Okay, now this is better. Meredith Melville and Jen McGinnis, who's her staff person, who Jen has taken such great care of us. Alex Oquendo for setting up stuff that some of which he didn't even, you know, supposed to be setting up. And I want to thank Mercedes, whose last name I can't remember, but Mike Wazalewski, who was taking care of me, like, oh my God. So, okay, we're good, right? And, you know, after this, y'all can go home. And the generations told and untold who carry, develop, and bless us with this music. Okay? Hear, hear. All right, now let's get it on. Okay. We're here to talk about the blues in two ways. We're here to talk about that that genre that emerges from the rural South and makes its way to the urban centers, that was formalized in those centers and on the roads of black vaudeville. But we're also here to talk about a historical entity that I'm calling the historical blues, that is the substance of which all black music on the Western Hemisphere is made. And that's what we're going to talk about as we go on later this morning. But because theory always follows practice, we're going to have a little practice before we go to the theory. They call it Stormy Monday, but Tuesdays just as bad. All right. There you go, Miss Lady. They call it Stormy Monday, but Tuesdays just as bad. Wednesday's even worse, and Thursday's mighty sad. of one of the kinds of the genre of the blues as it formalized in the urban centers. However, there are other ways to talk about the blues. And we can identify it. We can identify the blues as the stuff out of which all black music in the Western Hemisphere is made. That is a huge thing for me to say, but I intend to back it up right now. It is the stuff out of which African diaspora is made. Now, everybody doesn't call it the blues. In fact, I don't know what many people call it. Check me in 20 years, I'll let you know. But right now, I can tell you that based on the work of folklorist Harold Kurlander in Negro Music USA, 1963, Kurlander talks about the elements of Negro folk music. And he says that the blues, except for the formal aspects, except for the 8, 12, 16 bar aspects, everything else about the blues is found in every other kind of so-called, at that time, Negro folk music. He also says that you can find rural blues in the 20 and 30 bar range. And in fact, Alan Lomax recorded Joe Pugh in the 1940s in the Mississippi Delta, singing brilliant blues of like 31 bars or something like that. So this idea of 8, 12, and 16 bars is something that happens when people have to kind of standardize because you got to get the show on. Because you got to get up on it's a beautiful thing to be able to get up on a bandstand and have everybody know where it's at. And that makes community making really doable. And that's important when the community is built in so many ways around this cultural enterprise. But if you're making the music on your own, or if, on the other hand, it's becoming something else, then those formal aspects are not necessary. What do we get if we take those aspects away? What's left? That became my question. And so looking at the way the blues works, without those formal aspects, there's a tremendous amount left. Now, I want you to help me with something. I've been trying to figure out what to call this. And I'm calling it the historical blues. And that's a lot to say. And so this morning when I was making my little notes, it became THB. I like that, don't you like that? Okay, so now, that means now we have to do this. Please, please. This is the way we learn things. So it's like THB is the historical blues. Now, I didn't tell you, I should have told you this. I love being on a stage. I've loved being on a stage since I was 4, but I can never do it by myself. I always need help. You don't have to get up here and help me, but you can help me right where you are. Okay, so it's THB is the historical, can you help me with that? THB is the historical blues, and THB is the historical blues. Yeah, THB. Yeah, clap now, Bill. That'll help us. THB is the historical blues. THB is the historical blues, and THB is the historic. THB and THB is the aspects and say that the blues is the stuff of which other things are made. What made me think about this really was when the folks that I knew said, there is no jazz without the blues. And I used to think, where's the 8 bars? Where's the 12 bars in jazz? That's because they weren't talking about that. They were talking about everything else. So the blues, all right now, is the yeast in 3 measures of meal. It is the yeast hidden in 3 measures of meal. And the way you can tell that that's what's going on is that if you have a kind of a structure, it used to be a triangle. That would have been very easy to do, right? With the Americas over here at the top, Africa on one side, and Europe on the other. And, you know, so we're talking about, it's like a little Pac-Man. Boing, 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 boing. All over the Western Hemisphere, where that little Pac-Man goes shows how much influence each of those places would have. But now I have to open up that triangle and make it some other kind of geometric thing that I can't name. I'm sure someone in here can. And so you kind of open the triangle, it goes 1, 2, 3, and over here is Asia and the East, and connected to the Americas. The influence of the historical blues is so great that even before the globalization that Europe kind of kicked off, around the Indian Ocean, those elements of the blues are moving. And so we hear it even there in the Indian subcontinent. We hear it, you can, and then there are people who are traveling across the globe, Filipino people, who ran up out of Spanish galleons, and ran up into the swamps of New Orleans. So there is that influence as well. So it's not enough to say Americas, Africa, Europe without Asia. And in a minute, I'm going to try to figure out how I can get Oceania and all that in there. Because the blues is truly an international form. So now, one day I'm going to have this, all these notes are going to be all written all neat. And then I'm going to be like, okay, I'm bored now, let's move to something else. I'll never be bored with the blues. Because there is so much to talk about. Let's talk about what these elements, the characteristics of this are. One is that rhythm is key. If we talk about the musics from across the world, 3 things, aside from sound, qualities of sound, texture, and moment-appropriate things, you know, that sort of thing, which is something else that happens with the blues because it's an African form. If we look at the elements of music, generally we're looking at melody, harmony, rhythm. And you can see where you are on the globe, and by looking at what is most important where, and how these elements interact with each other. Well, when the blues is involved, rhythm is primary, it's foremost. It is absolutely, fundamentally, radically, and one of the most important issues that will involve. Actually, I'm going to kind of move as fast as I can because we're going to revisit some of these ideas in a different way. So, rhythm is key, but that's nothing new for us. But what we might not be thinking about is percussivity. Percussivity. Ba, 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 ba. Whenever blues inflected or blues influenced or blues informed music is going on, not only are the drums percussive, sharp movement, but but the bass is percussive. And what happens, that is percussive. And when you're going to see a little video in a little while, and you can see that people are dancing percussively. It's boom, 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 boom. You remember that old hustle thing? Well, I'm just saying. After that, the kinesthetic issues around the blues. I just recently worked with a choreographer, well, a couple of choreographers, who are not working in a blues aesthetic. I'm not a dancer, but my daughter, now I'm saying this not just for no reason. My daughter works for the Quakers. And she says she is not a Quaker, she is Quaker adjacent. So, I am not a dancer, I am dancer adjacent. At least if we're not talking about the blues inflected forms. Now I can shake my tail feather there. Okay, but when it comes to, you know, not so much. But one of the things that I have noticed with the choreographers with whom I've worked for, I would say, over a 40-year period, that's embarrassing, over a 40-year period, is that when they are not working in the blues aesthetic, within the blues universe of kinesthetic ideas, what they do to music is separate. The dance and the choreography is one thing. The music is something else. Now, the music may inspire the choreography. The dancers may eventually connect to the music. But if it is necessary, and I was just involved in a project where 2 weeks before the performance, one of the musician that I was working with, and I was doing poetry and doing a little bit of singing, he said, "I'm really not happy. You're using recorded music and we got musicians here." So we had to create the music for the choreography 2 weeks, and they've been working on the choreography. She's been working on that for 7 months. 2 weeks before, we had to create stuff. And the dancers were like, "Ooh, okay." And you know, so they're, you know, and so we created something very much inspired by what they were doing. But the point I'm trying to make is the choreography did not come from the music. It did not live in the music. It was a separate entity from the music. Not so in blues aesthetic. In the historical blues traditions that we see moving, coursing around the Western Hemisphere, what I say is that music and movement are linked at the rhythm joint. That music and movement are linked at the rhythm joint. And so it's impossible, you know, when Hatter starts going, you know, I'm like, If I was sitting up in here, you know, I have a conservatory training background, which is to say, I love that music. I'm not saying I don't love the music. I have paid blood somewhere. And coming, a little girl from Harlem, you know, and I grew up on Motown and stuff like that. When I got to conservatory, I was nervous. I tried to put my hand in my pocket. I got slammed. You know, you don't move. You don't move this elite form. Now let me just say to you, just because the blues comes out of rural places does not mean we're not talking about a classical tradition. We're talking about a classical tradition, an elite classical tradition. It's just that other people were not acknowledging the eliteness of the people who were doing it. That's their problem. the people who are doing the blues are carrying very important information. Let me see if I'm supposed to say something else before I say my big takeaway line. I want you to get this. Okay, okay, okay. Let me just say, also, when these European and other traditions are dancing, it's from here up. You know, oh, that's lovely, you know, up, pulled up, you know, here, 90 degrees, like that. When the blues, the historical blues, THB, is active, everybody's grounded. You're grounded, and it is into the ground. That is, we call that the get down thing. As soon as that shows up, wherever you're looking, look to see where the Africans are. Because they're up in there somewhere. You might not be able to see them anymore, but they are there. You should have heard me talking fast to some young Latinas, Mexican and Mexican-American women in South Central when I did a thing with them on the blues, because the Latinas were like, I ain't feeling this. Bueno, no puedo hacerlo, no. ¿Quién es? No sé. Well, I had to do a whole thing about the blues in el mundo, Afro mundo latino, about the African world in the Latino world, which in many cases, it's hidden under mestizo, but Lord knows it's there. And so is this. I'm not even going to go there, but that was wonderful. They learned the blues. And we learned, que es la vida un carnaval de Celia Cruz. Now that was rocking. That was rocking. We don't have time to talk about Cuba. Anyway, okay. There is individual improvisation within a communal frame. That is also an important part of THB. Individual improvisation within a community that is organized in order to support that individuality. There is also a great deal of structure in that frame. People who see this stuff happening don't realize perhaps how much structure is involved, because it's not hierarchical, it's internal. Paul Berliner talks about multiple foci of power, that the power first is here and it can move over here to someone else. If there are 5 people standing here and they're all playing, and it can move over here to someone else. Someone looking from the outside might not be able to see or understand that that's what's happening. But if you understand how this process works, you can see the power shift. Not only is this a musical reality, it is also a communal reality. It's a reality that comes out of what we understand now of enslaved communities. If you have a plan to do something that is activist, and you are enslaved, it's probably not such a good idea to stand up and talk about it outside of community, and perhaps even inside community, all the time. And the stories tell us that if you are going to be trained to be a leader, you better make sure that your activism is effective, organic, and it takes things from all the folks in the community to put it together, and hidden. That is one of the things that we see in the historical blues, wherever it lands, depending on where the Pac-Man is in that little whatever that is. I'm going to find out what that is. Okay, also, the blues make you feel better. Huh? The blues often make you feel better. No, sometimes make you feel better and often make you feel really good. That is an important point for us to make. especially since there have been historians who have said, one, that the Sambo mentality, yes, sir, master, yes, sir, yeah, okay, yes, sir, master, that was the marker of the destruction of the psyche of Africans and their descendants serving in slavery. On the contrary, there is an old blues lyric that says, you don't know my mind. Okay? And just because your behavior does not indicate the content of your mind or of your character. It doesn't indicate the level of your intellectuality. It does not suggest how you have analyzed the situation to understand who you're supposed to talk to and who you're not. All it shows is what you're doing right now today, this moment. Since, oh, well, I'm not even gonna go there. Okay, so, feeling better. Let me just mention this too. One of the reasons why Stanley Elkins, and this was also 1963 in there, it was a very interesting time period because there's all of this going back and forth, all of this mix and bubble in the scholarship. So Harold Corlander is saying, you know, the Negro Folk Music USA, there's something really serious to talk about. And Stanley Elkins is saying, in Slavery, a Problem in American Institutional Life, he's saying, you know, they were completely destroyed. And one of the reasons he says that enslaved people were completely destroyed mentally is that they had no way of addressing the tremendous hegemonic power of the system of slavery. He said they had no psychological protections. And I'm like, yes they did. They had the historical blues. Because THB is the historical blues. Okay, now, the historical blues also carry with them a way to assess and understand evil. Let me say that in a few more ways. When Africans and their descendants, when Africans from so many different places around this 10 million square miles, 10,000, sorry, it's 10,000 square miles, 10 million people, okay. 10,000 square miles of the continent of Africa. You know, there are so many people, you go 50 miles, you can't talk to somebody. But just like in many places, there is the deep structure of culture. And something that we are just beginning to talk about are the deep structures of culture that flower in theologies and philosophies. No longer should we accept the idea that only Christian theologians exist. Theology, the study of the idea of God, exists. We can do that about so many groups because the idea of God exists in so many places, and it is certainly not all the same. Concepts of morality, what is appropriate, what is good, what is not appropriate, what is evil, how do you deal with that? Africans came out of this deep structure with this tremendous flowering of a nuanced idea of the nature of evil. The idea that it's not good and evil. It's not black and white. Sometimes there's gray, and as I enjoy saying, sometimes there's lilac. African peoples came with a tremendous from traditions that had long taken on these ideas. And they came into a situation in which the devil represented evil. Not having come largely, now, a lot of folks were coming from Islam, okay? And Islam and Christianity, which we'll talk about too, you know, have different ways of dealing with this. But not all Islamic peoples think the same about everything. In fact, the Islam that grew up in Africa was the only Islam that involved prophecy. Christianity in Africa, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but let's not forget that there was Christianity on the continent of Africa, and I am going to talk about that in a minute. However, the takeaway idea here is that the historical blues, and of course the genre of blues, but the historical blues is the marker of African cultural presence in the United States and truly around the Western Hemisphere. It is the mark, it is the way we know that Africa is in the house. As soon as THB shows up, you just say to yourself, Africa is in the house. Okay. So now, now I think it's time for us to see a little something, something. And while we're doing, oh, I'm not supposed to do that, sorry. And while we're doing that, let me say, one of the things that the historical blues represents, as I said, was a response. It is to understand evil, and it is to make a response to it. Now, I can't think of anybody who's had to respond more forcefully to the idea of evil recently than the people of New Orleans. And what I have here is a musical experience that musical and dance experience I really wanted to share with you. One of the reasons why we know that THB was going on in the 18th century, in 1700s and 1800s, is that Europeans could not understand that Africans had any spiritual lives at all. Because what they knew or considered, what Europeans knew and considered as spirituality didn't look at all like what Africans were doing. And, this is the part I've forgotten, how can you forget this? There was sex. There was sex and sexuality. Sex was, from the European point of view, and sexuality had to do with a dualism where body and spirit are split. Spirit gets all the goodies, and body is the evil part. And since, at least for them, conceptually, it was really hard to get the idea of sex without the body, sex went down the road with that. Now, for Africans, as far as I'm understanding, you know, kind of from that whole deep structure flowering thing, people were, first of all, tremendously, I have seen so many peoples who are so reverent about their ancestors. And the promise of continuing the line. That is tremendously powerful. Well, you can't do that without sex. Hello? It's a small point, but somebody ought to make it. And along with that, somebody designed the machine so it's actually fun. Go figure. So, you know, Africans are coming with a very different idea of the gifts of spirituality. Certainly among Yoruba people who reverence Oshun. If anybody here is aware of Oshun, she, who is the deepest woman of many deep women, that we will ever meet. She who could tame Shango because she came with honey. And he was messing up the whole world. And she came and put a little of her honey on his lips. Now, we're not even going to go to the place where we talk about African metaphor. However, Oshun is revered for the power she represents. She's also a warrior. She's also a mother, depending on the story. But here in 2006, Katrina and the Army Corps of Engineers ripped New Orleans and stomped the poor and working poor, many of them black folks, in poor communities yet again. Now this, I couldn't find Jun Canoe to show us, you know, all kinds of stuff. And actually I found more clips of these folks that I thought I wouldn't have time to explain, so we're not seeing them. However, this is, I think, 2009. This is Rebirth, which is an ensemble, a group. And the Treme Sidesteppers. So, now, that one of the things that transforms the music is the fact that we need it. The music, you know, I was listening to the music, which was very nice, of lots and lots of folks, and they had elements of the historical blues, but I didn't hear the kind of music that comes from when you have to do it. That becomes, in itself, it reflects the reverence of this music. Because the blues will touch you when you are low, low down. It goes down deep in you and will pull you up. And in many cases, it pulls you up because it pulls you up. Wait, that was a really good idea. Way to go. In many cases, it pulls you up, here it is, because it reflects and articulates where you are. It doesn't stand above you or outside of you. It speaks right to where you are. And then it can lift you right out of stuff. Now the question here being, are we at the green thing yet? Right now. Okay. The question is, how did this happen? All right. I got to do this fast because we got things to do. Daggone. But we started a little late, so we might go a little later than I had intended. All right. So, how did this happen? Okay. Ring shout. Anybody here heard of ring shout? Ah, okay, cool beans. Well, for those of us who are not aware, ring shout is what you would call a negotiated form. That means that when African folks, it's not shouting in church. It's a different thing. The word shout is expected to come from saut, which is an Islamic term for processing in a circular way around the Kaaba, which is the sacred stone, the sacred center of the mosque. So we expect that there were some Islamicists in these rings. There were also people who were Christian in these rings. So many African people came from lots of different places with traditions of worship that involved circles, being in a circle and being around. I love to work even with classes in circles because you can see everybody's face. What kind of intellectual excitement am I supposed to have from the back of somebody's head? That's a factory model. It's not a developmental model where we learn from each other and we take from each other and we give to each other. So, here they come with all of these circles, but they're doing different things in the circles. Well, over time, they have to negotiate how they're going to do this because now, instead of being in different communities, they are expected to make one community. So they have to negotiate over time. The ring shout was it became the way in which enslaved people then shifted the ring into the practice of Christianity. So it became actually the identity of Black Christianity. Now, while all this stuff was going on, when's the last time you had to make a decision like, what kind of ice cream are you going to have? When I go into Cold Stone or someplace like that, Thrifty's actually, but when I go into, the place where the ice cream is, and I'm looking, okay, well that looks good. I don't know, I had the Rocky Road last time. But the pistachio, I remember I had some no, I'm not feeling that today. Maybe just chocolate. That could work. Okay, let's try that. Next time, I don't know. That's kind of the way some of us make up our minds. Some of us know what we want and go for it. Others have a process that's longer or different. So, when we say the negotiation of this cultural practice, that is not to say that people sat down and talked to each other and said, okay, now, how much would you like to give in? And are you decided to come and be in, okay, well, if you're going to do this, Sometimes this happens and sometimes it doesn't. What we find in the stories is that people are carrying out African traditional spiritual practice in a space, and in the same space, they are also carrying out Christian practice. Now, we can call that concurrent spiritual practices. But of course, between these spiritual practices that are going on at the same time, there is some tension. Because folks want to make different choices. And you know, one of the things about African ways of doing things seems to be that there seems to be some openness to different ways of doing things. Now, here we have traditionalists who have negotiated their way into this one ring. Here we have black Christians. So let's talk about black Christianity for a second. Now, many people did not encounter Christianity until they got here. But not everybody. And let me remind you, biblically, we got one thing. And that is that Solomon and Sheba, remember that? Solomon and Sheba, and he learned about manipulating women from his father. And when the Queen of Sheba came, because she'd heard lovely things about this little kingdom, now she's got this huge kingdom. And since they had to go see a black woman, you can't stop her. So she came over here, and she's looking at him, and he's looking at her. Hello. And so he worked out some stuff. I forgot to look and see what it was, but it was something like, you know, if you drink water, I got you. Well, she went home pregnant. That's the deal. And so the Judeo part of Judeo-Christian is then on its way to Ethiopia, just after King David. So that's Old Testament. In the New Testament, Philip, one of the apostles of Jesus, is walking down the road and he sees a eunuch, a servant of, it says Candace, but it means Kandake. That is the queen of Nubia. A servant of the Kandake of Nubia sitting in a cart, you know, horses, and he's reading from the prophet Isaiah. The prophet Isaiah is in Ethiopia, is in Nubia. I mean, the writings of the prophet Isaiah, because it's Old Testament. And now it's 2,000 years later, and they are reading Isaiah. And so Philip says, do you understand? And it's the part about how Jesus is supposed to be the one. And so he says, Philip says to the guy, do you understand what you're reading? And the guy says, well, no, unless somebody teaches me. And so Philip gets up into the cart and teaches him about Jesus. And that's the point at which Christianity comes to Africa. It comes to Africa within 50 years of Jesus leaving this place. And then, and so these are the only two, these are two that I am aware of. So all the stuff that I'm not aware of, y'all go take care of that, okay? These are just the little clues. So, now, then there's, in the, I think, 16th century, the kingdom of K-Congo, where the royal house of the kingdom, well, there are many royal houses and they're not all agreeing. So there's a lot of going on in Congo. You know, there's a lot of warring and factionalism, political intrigue in Congo of that time. But basically, they're Christian. The royal houses are Catholic. And what happens is that Catholicism then kind of moves throughout the place, and people do with it as they do with so many things. They take what they want and they leave what they don't. In order to be baptized, you don't get water, because that's not their thing. You get salt, because salt kills evil. So children are being baptized with taking salt on their tongues. Well, in that place, there was Beatrice, or Kimpavita, her name. And Beatrice articulates and leads an African Reformation in Congo. It is an organic African Reformation. As a matter of fact, she embodied St. Anthony. And because of that, I swear to you, all of her followers were called Little Anthonys. Really, really, I ain't lying. This is too important. Okay, so we also know that, and she led a revolt. I mean, this child was like 23 or something. And she was like a Joan of Arc from Congo. And she was in big trouble, and they finally had to, well, I don't think she saw 30. But we also know that in the Haitian Revolution, there were people who were talking about, and so that's 1789. There were people who had been taken out of Congo into slavery, and whose, not only their great-great-great-great-grandparents had known about being a Little Anthony. And they then were really still talking about that stuff. Ha. We're gonna have to a little bit. So, in any case, Roosevelt, come on out here. We have things for y'all to do. Because. Okay, let me just say, as the end of that ring shout thing, so here we have black Christians who are trying to do this particular kind of Western Christianity. They're not doing African Christianity, they're doing Western Christianity. And they're in this place where there's a tension between concurrent spiritual practices. And so, apparently, Kwame Nkrumah says, when you cross your feet and you're dancing in Akan, in Ghana, that means that you're getting ready to dance in earnest. Well, I asked him, and he said that this was a right idea. I said, did you mean when you said dance in earnest, did you mean that the deity was going to embody? He said, yes. So that means that in the ring, there's been a big question for a long time. Why, if you crossed your feet in the ring, you got thrown out of the ring, and not just out of the ring, out of church? Well, the deal is that if you crossed your feet, when people really knew that symbol, they knew it across a lot of folks. If you cross your feet, you're fitting to bring somebody else up in here. So that, but the foot crossing stayed, and it stayed a long time. It stayed longer than people remembered what it meant. It just meant when you do this, you're dancing. Now, there's a lot to talk about in there, but when you do this, you're dancing and you're out. Well, when they threw out this, they threw out everything else that was African-centric, that they felt they could get rid of and still maintain what they felt was the most important parts of connecting with the deity. So when they threw this out, they shaved off sexuality. They shaved off this nuanced sense of evil. They shaved off string instruments in some cases. They shaved off all kinds of things that then were embodied in this blues. It became, everything else became the blues. Now the blues goes underground, it comes back up. It goes underground, it comes back up. And we see it then, the historical blues, in jazz. When people say, you know, no jazz without the blues, we see it in jazz. We see it in rhythm and blues. We see it in gospel, when Thomas Dorsey and Willie Mae Ford brought them, brought them back into, brought the blues back into church. It was back into the sacred space. But it never lost its own sacredness. Now, you're going to have to give us a little flex, because we got some things to do. Come on. What good is a melody? We're not going to do the rhythm part. We're going to do the improv part. What good is music if it ain't reflecting something sweet? It ain't the melody, and it ain't the music. There's something else that makes the tune complete. My word for this. We are about to enter into the research, okay? And since theory follows practice, you have to practice. So now, music connected to movement at the rhythm joint. Now, Roosevelt kind of taught me a song, so I'm still on the paper for the words. But this is the time when we're going to think about movement. And if you would be so kind, move. Okay, here we go. Well now, come on now. 3 days of snow in Birmingham. Thought you would wonder where I am. Ran on all night long. No comfort home to make you move. Okay, now, let's go straight to the House of Writings. Now, I wanted to just say that it's very important to think about the blues as telling the truth. And so, this helps a little bit. Don't forget blues and reverence. There is a house